bad day is an understatement. A ship that runs outside the channel risks grinding to a halt, shutting down the entire harbor. The job of keeping a ship on course doesn't belong to its captain. It belongs to the harbor pilot. Harbor pilots work full-time in Charleston Harbor.
The harbor pilots have been here since the 1700s. We were organized in 1890 as an association. You're basically hiring a local expert to get that ship safely in and safely out, and it works this way in every port worldwide.
When a request is made for a Charleston pilot, by law, they have 3 hours to respond. To manage this, Charleston has 20 pilots. Somebody's on call 24/7. For safety reasons, the pilot boats always have at least 2 crew members aboard. One to go on deck and spot check the pilot during the transfer, and the other to steer the boat, keeping as close to the ship as possible when the pilot is in the most danger.
I personally have seen 10 to 12 foot waves. We'll get 30 to 40 knot winds, sometimes mixed up seas, lightning, thunder, pretty much anything. We're out 365 days a year, and that includes the wintertime, which is a lot more exciting than this.
Harbors are like fingerprints. Every one is different. To be a pilot takes a 3-year apprenticeship. They have to know the ocean floor so well they can draw it from memory, by hand. Their job is to keep the ship in the channel, because leaving it is instantly dangerous.
These ships are operating in a channel that's 40+ feet deep, but outside the channel, it can be 2 feet deep. So you really have to know the channel, you gotta know the sea bottom, and you also have to deal with a lot of traffic, and you're doing that again in all weather, with tides and currents involved. Shipping doesn't stop when the weather gets bad. Have to get the guys on the ships, and they have to bring the ships in so they can get to their berths on time and get their labor started and keep the wheels moving. The ports don't shut down for weather, so we can't either.
They know every channel, current, and quirk.
We turn the ship so that the weather is on the other side of the ship, makes it a lot safer. If you board them on the opposite side of the weather, it can be 12 foot on one side and flat calm on the other. We're gonna board right now the ATB Honor. She's a articulated tugging barge carrying probably some kind of chemical or fuel.
This is when it gets dangerous. Besides the weather, every boarding situation is unique. Pilot JT is already assessing the situation.
We obviously want to keep him clear of all the buoys, and we obviously want to keep his draft clear of any shallow spots, so that's why we're out here at the Raycon. And we call it a Raycon because if the light extinguishes, you can see it as a blip on the radar. And it gives us enough time to get squared up in the channel and clear of all the dredge activity out here. The key is he don't want to catch the back of my leg, and he doesn't want his boat to ride up on this rig, so it's going to be a little bit tricky, but we'll figure it out.
In one horrible year, 5 pilots died getting on and off ships in U.S. waters.
This situation, this tugging barge, is too deep to use a ladder, so we're going to have to step over, which can actually be a little bit more tricky for Toby because he's got to do it without catching the lip of our rig. This is an unusual boarding situation. This is very unusual. So we're going to step over here, which can be a little bit different because we don't have a whole lot to hold on to. With a ladder, at least we have some kind of security there.
The harbor pilot prepares to climb aboard. This is the most dangerous part of a harbor pilot's job.
Once we put the pilot on board, the ship is his, and we'll pretty much just be waiting out here for the next ship.
But they don't have to wait long. Now, Toby Felix switches places with his partner, Bradley Dinwiddie, who takes the wheel. Toby heads out on deck.
So we're about to disembark a pilot. We're going to take him from the outbound vessel that he has navigated to sea. In just a few moments, we'll be taking him off that ship.
It's ironic that the pilots who guide the ships to safety are in more danger than anybody else is. This time, the pilot boat has been dealt a different hand. This ship they're working with is bigger, and it's going out to sea. They maneuver into position. From the moment their passenger appears, they don't take their eyes off him. In heavy fog or driving rain, if the pilot falls in, they have a heat-seeking camera to help find him. Toby is on deck waiting to help him. These are the critical moments. It comes down to a short jump, but a mistake now could be fatal.
All right, dear Bradley.
Yes, sir.
Good job, man. Job well done. Appreciate it.
For all the high technology and big machines, sometimes it's the little things that make the difference between life and death.
Shoes, I never put so much emphasis on my shoes in my life till I started this job.
Yeah.
Yeah, and grip too. You know, you want to get some shoes that hold on to the deck. You walk around on tankers and get oily decks. You got to be careful, slipping and sliding. Oh my God, because you're standing up for hours on end. Feet start to hurt just standing in one position. With these bigger ships, the jobs will get longer. They're taking this entrance channel another 5 miles farther offshore, so we'll have about a 20-mile run on the bar just to get into the harbor. It could take us an hour and a half just to get inside here into the harbor with this new channel. And these bigger ships, too, with the kind of draft they're going to bring, can't go as fast as you normally go on some of these smaller ships. So it'll change some of the dynamics of the way we do business.
And while bigger ships mean they'll have to go slower out here, inside the harbor, where there's less space and less room for error, other specialists will be needed to safely dock these mega marine machines. Charleston Harbor is getting ready to meet the massive ships of tomorrow. And while they do it, they've still got to keep the harbor flowing for the business of today. Moving these giant ships is such a specialized job, you need a different expert for each stage of the process. As the harbor pilot steers the ship into Charleston Harbor, an entire chain of workers and machines are poised to play their part. First among them, the iconic tugboats. Tugboats are small but mighty. They use ropes and their hulls to push and pull bigger ships, steering, stopping, and moving them when the ships can't do it themselves.
My name is Stephen McDuffie. I'm the captain of the Jeffrey McAllister and 5,000 horsepower Tier 3 tractor tug. It can walk sideways, it can do everything backwards as it does forwards. There's really no front to back, do whatever you want it to do. 2 8-cylinder EMDs. They're Tier 3, 5,000 horsepower. They're 2,500 apiece.
That's more horsepower than 4 Mack trucks.
Power helps a lot. And the ships are getting bigger, so the power is becoming more and more necessary. The horsepower is going up, but the size of the tug is actually getting a little bit shorter, but they're getting a little bit wider to handle the power. 5 years ago, where a 900-footer or a 1,000-footer was the biggest thing you saw, now we're seeing stuff that's over 1,200 feet and about 160 foot wide, so they've gone up a good bit. I mean, almost 50,000 tons.
Right now, a tanker needs to be brought into dock. It looks huge, but it's only half as long as the ships Charleston will welcome in the future. A harbor pilot has got it this far. And once Craig Mitchum arrives at the ship, he'll take it over to dock it.
I'm a McAllister docking pilot here in Charleston, South Carolina, and we're going to get ready to go dock a tanker.
The docking pilots know the docks intimately, and the tugboat captains can't see the dock over the ship when they're positioning it. So from the bridge, the docking pilot acts as their eyes, guiding them through it.
The reason the captains don't dock their own ships is because they go all over the world, and they're never in one port long enough to really learn the little nuances that go on with putting the ship alongside safely. They don't know these tugs, and they're not familiar with the water, you know, and the elements around it. The confluence of currents make our job so important that we know the way this water flows and how it's supposed to affect the ships. It takes a lot of years to figure it all out. This is what we do. We try to keep them safe. All right, we're getting ready to go alongside the tanker. I'm going to go up, and I'll assume control of the ship. I'll be telling the tugs to come alongside and make fast and put their lines up. And I'll be telling them to push and pull as necessary to maneuver the ship along with the ship's propulsion to get it alongside and in position at the tanker berth. I'll let you look for a backer there and you drop up under that starboard pole.
Imagine that just to get to your office, you had to climb a wet, slippery, 3-story rope ladder. It's a long way up and a long way down. Steady feet, steady nerves, and steady as she goes. Now, the tricky task of synchronizing the movements of 3 ships in perfect harmony to dock the tanker. How do they do that? With good old-fashioned rope. They tie the 2 tugs to the tanker.
Years ago, they used cable, but cable doesn't give a whole lot. And so when it breaks, there's really no fixing it. A line, it can stretch, and when we do a job, you can see it. The diameter will go to about half of what it currently is, and it gets rock hard. It's definitely a lot easier to work with, too. All these ropes float. In the past, all the ropes sank. If for some reason the ship dropped the line in the water, it'd sink to the bottom. And I pity the guys 30 years ago that actually had to pull it up off the bottom because they didn't have a winch. Everything was by hand.
We're going to slide back. And when these guys are up over your head, they're going to toss us a line down. So we're going to go ahead and slide back. We're going to go ahead and tie it off to our tag line. They're going to pull our tow rope up, and we'll make fast to them.
They used little ropes to pass the big ropes. Connecting in exactly the right place is a critical decision.
The less power you have, the more critical it is where you position the boat. You're going to want to get more on the ends as far as you can to try to use leverage more than power.
Hey, hold on a second. We're going to go back behind the house.
Hey, mate, we go behind the house. Behind the house.
The first attempt is off. They need to reposition. A mistake now will cost later if they need to act quickly. It's a game of give and take, and the powerful winches are terribly important.
The winch is actually a fairly new thing as far as ship docking. When I first started, everything was by hand. And I mean, we would make it fast on the bit, and you had no winch. Everything was, you know, you'd lay it out on deck and then put it up, and then you'd make it fast to the bit, and then you had to pull it in by hand. And it was a whole lot more tedious than it is now.
Once these ships are fastened together, everything is counting on those ropes. Right now, the weight of the ships and the force of their engines are all concentrated in the ropes. If they snap, it flies like a hatchet, slashing through anyone on deck.
When you start hearing that little bit different creak in lines, it's time to go. And don't stop, don't try to do anything with it, just leave. Because it will hurt you, and it'll hurt you bad.
So when we say hold fast, we mean secure, lock it down. It's just an old nautical term, and it just means we're all set. So we're all fast back here. The other boat's making fast up forward.
But then things get more complicated. This is where the rubber hits the road in Charleston's narrow harbor. Wider harbors don't have these problems.
Once we pass this outbound ship right here, the pilot's going to make passing arrangements. We'll go ahead and start working over to the dock. The cargo ship outbound has a pilot on board, and this tanker that we're working has a pilot on board. So they're actually talking to each other on the radio, making passing arrangements.
They've got to figure out where they want to pass each other and whether we're going to go into the terminal or we're going to pass and then make our turn into the terminal.
The ships are built for crossing the ocean. They travel for weeks in a straight line. Once they're in the confines of Charleston's harbor, they can't maneuver. They're basically helpless.
Worst case scenario would be a mechanical failure on either the ship we're on or the ship coming by.
Even worse, they can't exactly stop on a dime.
There's no pumping the brakes. They throw that in full astern. It's going to take them several miles before they actually come to a slow down.
The tugs have to be the gas pedal, the brakes, and the steering wheel, because these big ships aren't made for steering in tight quarters.
Well, most of it's just the amount of weight they are, and they can't stop very quick. So, I mean, they're just sluggish. You know, if they're out at sea and they can use the full power, then they have a little bit more maneuverability, but once they get inside a harbor or anywhere that's tight, a river, they don't really have a whole lot that they can do because at slow speeds, they're really not maneuverable at all.
This might not look like a tight squeeze to you, but to an experienced crew member, this is nerve-wracking. The forces generated by two ships passing so closely can create chaos.
You know, anytime you have two ships passing each other, the hydrodynamics of the water will affect the suction and the bank effect, so it can suck the ships together or it can push them apart, so you can run aground or you can run into each other. So it's important that you know what you're doing, and it's also important that the other pilots know what they're doing.
When the ships get more massive, everything else gets bigger too. More danger, tighter spaces, bigger horsepower, more powerful forces, and more strain on all those ropes.
So it's a pretty tense part.
Every move is important. Everybody on board is a specialist. Every job is a matter of life and death and critical to keeping the harbor running. Every part, person, and procedure moving like clockwork as one giant, mega marine machine. The tugboat captains of Charleston, South Carolina, are moving massive ships today, even as the rest of the port readies for the even bigger ships of tomorrow.
You wouldn't be able to have it go both ways. And right now with some of the bigger ships, it actually is getting kind of tight.
So for that passing arrangement, we came a little bit closer to the side of the channel than we normally would, just to allow more room for the passing arrangement. So right now we're pulling the ship back out towards the center of the channel. So we're pushing right now. So the Charleston harbor pilot that brought the ship in from offshore has gone give the con to the docking pilot. So the pilot boat will be picking up the harbor pilot here soon, while the docking pilot goes ahead and docks the ship using the tugs.
Another day, another docking. Another dangerous descent. All in a day's work for the docking pilots of Charleston Harbor. A process that began 15 kilometers out at sea is finally finished, thanks to the harbor pilot who passed the wheel to the docking pilot, and the tugboat captains all working together.
You want me to start a little bit on both tugs, because back 6 feet. Just start a little. We'll just start.
We're just holding the ship in place against the wind and the current. That way the line handlers on the other side of the ship can go ahead and make the ship fast. That way everything stays in line for the manifold so they can load and discharge their cargo. Thank you, mate.
Headed back to the dock.
Mission accomplished. On to the next one.
Someday soon, they'll be moving the biggest ships in the world all day and all night. Right now, they can only do it at high tide. And that makes the tugboat crew's jobs even more dangerous.
High tide allows these deep draft ships to be able to come in. So if that's at 2 o'clock in the morning in a thunderstorm, that's when we do it. You know, it is what it is.
But the future won't just sail in on its own. Charleston needs to go out and get it, haul it in, and get it safely to shore. Charleston has bet big on it. They've made a massive investment and charged full steam ahead. Soon their channels will be the deepest on the U.S. East Coast. Their turning basin will be wide enough to turn 2 ships at a time. No more Charleston Harbor traffic jam. And their cranes will be taller. Tall enough to handle the newest, biggest ships. Those ships won't wait for the tide. And now, they won't have to. The harbor is Charleston's past, present, and future. The larger Panama Canal could help East Coast ports poach a quarter of the business landing in the West Coast today. But only if they're ready for the biggest ships. For the 260,000 South Carolina workers whose livelihood depends on the port, there's treasure in those ships. And when they come over the horizon, Charleston will be ready to claim its share, thanks to the dredgers, the cranes, the tugboats, the heroes of the harbor. Mega Marine Machines.